What's up, people? I am back for another video. Today we are reviewing Superman 2, continuing on with the Superman films, and we are doing the Lester cut, which is the theatrical, because that was the one that was on the site. But this is the one I've seen the most. I have seen the Donner cut. I think it's a bit better from what I remember. I'll admit I haven't watched it a lot. The one thing there is difference is the Donner cut cuts out the Paris opening because this one opens with Superman saving Lois from the real opening, because there is it shows you what General Zod, Ursa, and Non were doing before and how they got captured at the start of the first movie. This one starts with Superman saving Lois from in Paris. And stops a hydrogen bomb. And they're basically the shock of the bomb. That's how they escape. And I'm gonna say it. I love Terrence Stamp as General Zod. Kneel before Zod is so iconic. Or I win. I always win. Good quotes. But I'm gonna say it, man. Up until the point where he calls out Superman, he kind of just, him and the three of them just, it's cool. It's kind of cool seeing them, I guess, go through the town and kind of destroy shit, but it was almost aimless. I didn't really feel like they had a goal. And that is my issue, really, with the movie. I think it's a great movie, largely. It was cool seeing Superman fight. I love the third act, minus there's some hokey stuff, especially when we get to Krypton again. Or not Krypton, when we go to the Fortress of Solitude. The multiple Supermans, that was weird. That shit was stupid. But I do think the third act was good. I just think the middle... But the stuff with Lois and Superman is very well done. And that is the one thing in the Donner cut too. Lois finds out Clark is Superman differently. It wasn't in Niagara Falls like in this one. There's a scene where she shoots him and he takes the bullet, and that's how... And now that scene is really good, by the way. But maybe one day I'll review the Superman 2 Donner cut at some point. But basically, so... And Lex Luthor gets freed, and he wants to surrender, and he basically wants to take over the U.S. He starts Zod, and basically Lex offers Zod Superman in basically for exchange of Australia for some reason, which is just why? God, it's Lex in these movies. I don't understand why they went this direction. I don't know if it was just because it was the 70s and 80s, so they felt like they gotta go hokey with the bad guy, but I've never liked it. And I think Gene Hackman could easily actually be, if they let him be, because I've seen him in other movies where he does play actual Lex Luthor from the comics. This one just doesn't do it. He is just a bumbling goof, and he's almost useless in this movie. He doesn't really have any use. I'll be honest, I don't fully remember what his role in the Donner cut was. Maybe it was a bit bigger, because in this, he's just there just to have another bad guy, but you didn't really need him. It should have just been Superman and Zod, and I get it. I guess they felt like they needed to have Lex, but... So he just wanted control of Australia, which is just random. And I do like the third act, though, when they go to Daily Planet, and because they know Superman will get there, and then when Superman first arrives, and you could tell this is probably where the scene in Spider-Man 2, when he suits up, or Spider-Man 3, sorry, when he comes back, because he does have his powers taken away from him for a little bit, because he decides to be with Lois. Hold on, I'm gonna plug this so it doesn't keep making that noise. So he comes back, and then we get the fight, which I'll admit the fight was good. It was cool seeing him save people in the middle of it. But yeah, I overall think this film is great. The score is great. I actually like the opening. The chemistry between Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder is so much better. I mean, I thought it was great in the first one, but you could definitely tell their chemistry is really much better in the second one. Like, you can definitely tell, you feel that, like, energy with both of them, and I really think they showed that in this. Awesome. Um, the scene where, they fly together, I've always loved those moments in these movies. Or, when he takes her to the Fortress of Solitude, which at this point, this is when Zod was taking over. And the only scene I don't love, though, is the diner scene. And this is a callback earlier. And because this is when, if you remember, Superman loses his powers. So he's just Clark at this point. And some asshole named Rocky, I guess, harasses Lois. And then so he tries to stand up for her, but then he gets beat up because he doesn't have his powers. He then comes back to beat up the. That's not. I get people try to defend this scene because these are the same ones that get mad at the scene that Superman does in Man of Steel when he throws the guy's truck. The difference is, in that scene, he's not Superman yet. He doesn't even have his power. He has his powers, but he's not. He doesn't have the suit. He doesn't have anything yet. This is full on Superman. I have a problem with this. Just, I get it. Golden Age Superman, Silver Age Superman may have did this. In theory, I just don't like this. This is petty. Like, he comes back to just beat this guy up. Trash the person's diner by. Yeah, he gave him money. And the fucked up thing is, I just feel like the movie could have just cut with him after doing the kiss. We cut to him flying, because he has the songs playing and he has the American flag. And he, says sorry, basically for missing out. And basically, that he will not abandon his duty again and all that. Basically kind of get his faith, people's faith back in him. And it's like, they should have just cut to that. We didn't need the scene of him going to the bar, or diner, sorry. We didn't need a scene of him going back to the diner. There was no reason for that scene to be in there. Even as a kid, I always thought it was weird. I was like, he comes back just to beat up this random dude? At least the scene in Man of Steel, he wasn't Superman yet. In this, he was Superman. He had been Superman for a minute. I don't like the idea of just, because it's some random asshole. I've always had a problem with it. I'm not going to rant too long about it, but I just wanted to mention it. But I do love that ending, though. He, talks to the president, and then he flies to space, like, obviously how all these films end. I still think it's a great film. I have a couple issues with, obviously, because this is the Lester cut, so this has this scene where he throws the S, which is fucking dumb. But I like these movies, but there's definitely some stuff in them that do not age well. Especially compared to, like, the Burton Batman, which I'm not going to say Batman 89 and Batman Returns, there aren't some stuff that don't age well. There are for sure, but comparatively, I feel like it ages better. Granted, Superman 1, I think for the most part ages better than this one. I think this one, I like this movie, but there was some stuff in here compared to the first one. So if I had to compare, as a kid, I definitely would have probably said Superman 2 is better, especially because, I was like, oh, I got to see Superman punch stuff. And while that was cool now, as an adult, objectively, the first movie is better. Superman the movie, it's better, not just a better plot, but I feel like it's paced better in a way, which is weird, because usually a sequel should be, 9 times out of 10, even though sometimes the original might still be a better movie, sequels are often paced better, because usually they get to the chase, especially horror, right? They get to the chase, so that's why in action, they get to the point, you don't have to do all that build-up like you did in the first movie. But for some reason in this one, I thought the first one was better, paced better. I think it was just because the bad guys, Lex Luthor, as bad as his plan was, at least there was build-up to Lex's plan throughout the film. Zod, Non, and Ursa, until the end, until they want Clark and they confront the president, I don't really feel like they do anything. Like, they just kind of go around destroying stuff, which is cool. And I did like the scene where they're talking to the news, but I just felt like they needed it did feel like they were just kind of meandering until we got to that point in terms of them actually getting to their plot, because I didn't feel like they had a goal compared to like Zod in Man of Steel. He had a goal. up until he wanted to call out Superman, I didn't really feel like Zod had a goal in this movie. And maybe it's just because it just be this version of it. So, who knows, maybe in the Donner cut, they probably have more. But if I'm just talking this specific movie, that first bit when they just, I did like the scene where they're on the moon beating up the people. But when they got to Earth, they would just go into a town and just destroy it for a bit until they confronted the president. So that's my only issue with the movie. But everything else is great. The scene when he saves the boy, I've always loved. When he suits up, and the music cues are always great with the John Williams score. So overall, I would still give this film like a 7.5 out of 10 objectively, but I still think it's a great one. It's a great sequel. It's cool. It was cool seeing Superman actually fight. Even though it's 1980, so the effects aren't gonna be the best, but it's still a great film. So, and then probably I already have an idea what the tagline for this video is going to be. Easily kneel before Zod. It's not even hard. It's like, anyways. So next week, and like I mentioned earlier, we're gonna be on a string of just bad Superman movies for a while, because we got Superman 3 next week. The only good thing about that movie is Richard Pryor, and I do like the scene when he first arrives and he saves like this, I think it's like a factory that's like on fire, and like a chemical spill's happening and he stops it. That scene was cool. And then the scene when he beats himself, like the bad Superman, and then he beats him, and then he like rips off the suit. You see the S and the music starts playing. Like, that scene's great. So Superman 3 has moments, but it's a pretty bad movie. You could tell the villain in the end was clearly supposed to be Brainiac, but they just didn't commit to it. And then you have like the fake Lex Luthor in the movie, which was just the bumbling rich dude, which kind of is dumb because you already did that with Lex in the first 2 movies. So it's just we have the same character. And then you got Superman 4, and then you got Returns after that. So we're in for some shit, guys, for a bit here. For the next bit until at least Man of Steel. So it's a while. But we'll get there, guys. Superman 2 is good. It does suck that the next few Superman movies aren't great, but Christopher Reeve, at least, he tries to be the good in it. Because I will say, Christopher Reeve is still great in Superman 3 and even in 4. Even though there's some line delivery in 4, which is pretty wonky. But I largely would still say he's like the best part of those movies. So, but anyways, we'll get to those. I'll review that probably next Friday is the plan. Tomorrow, I'm gonna review Batman Under the Red Hood. I'll probably try to find some time tomorrow or Sunday to do it. I'll see if I can find a Screen Rant article to talk about, and maybe that'll be my video for Sunday. And then I'll figure out what I'm gonna do next. I know next. I have a little bit of an idea. Like, I think we'll be reviewing the Faculty. That's a for sure. That's a definite. My review of movies Stig recommended me. I have to go into my messages and get the name, but I might do that. And I know next week's Thanksgiving, so. But yeah, I'll find us some movies to review. But that'll be next week. But yeah, I do plan on, like I mentioned, reviewing Batman Under the Red Hood either tomorrow. I'll try to find some time tomorrow to do it. If not, I'll do it Sunday. And then, and then Screen Rant, I'll try to do a video. I'll try to do that video tomorrow then, because then I can do Screen Rant on Sunday. But we'll see. Anyways, guys, I'm going to get ready to call it here. Superman 2 is a classic. No pin down podcast tomorrow, like no stream. But we did just upload our full AEW Full Gear predictions, which this show's going to be garbage. I already can predict that, so we just put our predictions up. Check that out, and the link will be in the description. But yeah, guys, I'm going to get ready to call it here. So the movie starts. We see the destruction of Krypton. I don't know why I started rapping the video. I think I went through like the movie, but no. I actually got to go through the plot. So we start the movie with basically how Zod and Ursa and Non get arrested. Which I thought that was cool. It was kind of a cool way to go back to the first movie and they get banished like they do in the first one. Then the film actually starts with Lois doing a job in Paris, but while this is happening, Superman manages to stop a hydrogen bomb that's planted on the Eiffel Tower. And that is how Zod and Ursa and Non get it. That's how they get escaped. And then they get their powers from the sun. And they land on the moon, kill a team of astronauts, which I thought that was a cool way to kind of introduce them in the movie in terms of hearing Zod speak for the first time is pretty well done. And they want to conquer the planet, which I guess that could be a goal, but I understand this was 1980, so sometimes you want to. There's nothing wrong with keeping villains simple. He wants to conquer Earth. That's it. So I guess that's a goal, but I just wanted a bit more because I felt like maybe what it was is like I knew he wanted to conquer Earth, but I wanted more than just him landing there and he just destroy some things. I think he should have like immediately confronted the president, but I get it. It was 1980. Probably filmed more like in 79, so they probably just the effects weren't there, right? So this is where they go to Niagara Falls for a job, Lois and Clark. And this is at this point she starts suspecting Clark is Superman, because there's even a scene earlier which she clearly sees him, but she sees her across the street and then he tries to get to her and a taxi's coming and he stops the taxi because the taxi hits him, but the taxi's like the front of it's totaled. And you tell me, Lois saw it. She clearly saw it. And so back at Niagara Falls, a child falls because Clark gets snacks for Lois while this is happening. And while the kid falls, he then goes to Superman and he manages to save a child. Lois tries to do like an experiment essentially to try to have Clark save her, so she drops, pretty much intentionally places herself on the rails to fall off, but Clark manages to save her without, becoming Superman. Then he trips and falls into his hand into the fireplace, and that's when Lois realizes his hand is not burned and nothing's happened, and that's when she realizes that he's Superman. Granted, in the Donner cut, it's done differently, and it's with a gun. And that's when he takes her to the fortress and they start pretty much falling in love and they wish their life with each other. He talks to his mother, Laura, and basically he gets his powers removed, which I'll be honest, as a comic fan and just in general, I love Spider-Man 2, but even in that movie I didn't really love it. I'm not a fan of people getting rid of their powers just to get it back. Granted, this was at a time when it wasn't done. This was like one of the first few movies to do it, and then even then jumping ahead of Spider-Man 2, it wasn't even done that much at that time. So, but obviously I feel like it has been overdone now at times, because it is like, I just want you to have your powers and do your superpower shit, but I think it works here for the plot, and Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve have such great chemistry. I can understand why some people will say this is their favorite Lois and Clark in terms of live action. Mine, I like Cavill and Amy Adams, but this is going to be a funny one. And this is more just because I watched the show again recently. Lois and Clark. I mean, Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher have such a great chemistry in that show. I've said it, Terry Hatcher, after rewatching that show, she is my favorite live action Lois. Margot Kidder, this is where I started kind of having problems with her Lois. She doesn't feel like a reporter anymore. And I get it, they wanted to have her be more in love with Clark and Superman in this movie. but I feel like you could still do it and have her be a reporter. I feel like her being a reporter is like damn near in the beginning it's acknowledged, but then like towards the end, eh. But I do love their relationship. So they spend the night together. Sorry, god damn it, fucking sirens, dude. Sorry about that. Zod and Non and Ursa go to the White House and force the president to surrender. And this is where we get the scene with Superman at the diner. And I'm fine with him getting beat up, but and this is where we get the scene where basically Zod calls out Superman. And I feel like this is where really, I think this should have been the first thing Zod did. If I were to change the pacing of this movie, that would be the one thing. Instead of, as cool as it was to go to that town, or you could do that sequence, or if you shorten that sequence, I think you could have still did it, but I did feel like it went on a little long. Because there was, like, rewatching, I was, like, thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, I do think the pacing could have been a bit better in that sense. But, I mean, we do get Neil before Zod, and that's just, I mean, that's an iconic quote. Like, I mean, you hear that said often, that even, like, in Justice, you have to have Zod say it, even though that's something I don't think he actually have ever said in the comics. I think that's just became a thing for Zod because of this movie, you know? So, at this point, Lex Luthor was helped broken out by Miss Tessmacher, and he convinces Zod and his cohorts to let him live, and for exchange for Superman, he wants control of Australia, which is just random. I guess he still wants to do, you know, what he was gonna do in California, make his own fucking real estate. But that was like, come on, man, that is not Lex Luthor. What it should have been is him being like, I want to be the president of the state, you know, of the country. That's what it should have been. Not, I get it. It was 1980. They have to do the hokey thing, but it just, I didn't think it was needed here. That is my frustration with Gene Hackman's Lex. I love Gene Hackman. I don't blame him. I think it's more the writing. I think they just got caught up and he needs to be the bumbling villain because it was 1980 and or in the 70s where villains, they felt like the villain you didn't have to take seriously because it's a comic book movie. And I hate to say it, I do think they looked at it like that in the sense of he's the bad guy. He doesn't need to be, you know, but it's weird because I thought, you know, they did better with the villains in this movie. Like Zod and the Kryptonians are great. I would have loved if those were great and then we actually had actual Lex Luthor from the comics. You know, the fact he still didn't have a LexCorp. I would have even lived with that if he said instead of doing the whole, he wanted Australia, let him be president. That's what it should have been, and I could see Lex Luthor doing that. You know, because then it would have made it like, okay. And then obviously he has an alternate plan where he fucks over the Kryptonians, because that's realistically, that's what Lex would do. He'd always have a backup plan. To where he'll make a deal with you, but then eventually if he gets what he wants out of that deal after a while, he'll just fuck you over. You know? And that's one of those things, and I get it. A lot of people grew up with this movie. I did too. I didn't grow up with it obviously at the time it came out, but you know, when I was a kid, that's one of this and then like the animated Superman, the animated series, were some of my first Superman content I watched. So I understand, like, especially for people who actually grew up with these movies at the time of release, I can understand why they love, you know, nostalgia. They have nostalgia for Gene Hackman as Lex. I don't blame those people. I did initially, but then I got more into the comics, and Lex Luthor is such a great villain that it's just sad that we've never really seen him adapted right. You know, besides in the Smallville show, but it's like, It's hard for me to take that show serious. I would love to see that Lex against an actual Superman in a suit. You know, it's like kind of wild. We've not really had a real Lex Luthor yet in a movie, and I respect Gene Hackman, and it's wild because I've said this multiple times that in other movies when he's a bad guy, I definitely see Lex Luthor in him, and it's just like, just let him be. If you just let him actually beat Lex Luthor from the comics instead of this comedy villain that just gets beaten every time. You never actually feel like he's a threat to Superman, even though Lex Luthor is a threat to Superman in a different way. You know, he's supposed to be like the equivalent of the Joker to Batman, you know? And I really feel like in these movies, you don't see that. And I know people are gonna get mad at me, I'll say it. Lex and BVS, as much as I don't like the hair, I would have. But I felt that at least that scene with Superman and Lex at the top of the LexCorp building, I felt that rivalry. I felt like that's the Lex Luthor Superman relationship I want in a film. I just wish he looked like actual Lex Luthor, bald. But I just feel like in these movies, I don't feel like he's just. I'm sorry, Hackman is just rich, dumb dude in these movies. Why the fuck does he want control of Australia? Just so what? Real estate? It's like, I can accept that plot as a kid, but when I just watch it now, I kind of roll my eyes at it. But I'm not going to go in on it too much. I still think this movie is great. So that's when they go to the Daily Planet, because they know that's where Superman's going to go. And then when Superman arrives back into town, after getting his powers back, I will admit that shit is great. I wonder if that was the inspiration for the scene in Spider-Man 3 when Spider-Man gets the red suit back. It had that same vibe. Like, he had been gone for a while, and then he comes back into town in the suit, and, he's been, after being gone for a while, it's the same deal. Like, he comes back, everybody's cheering, and then he confronts Zod at the window. I've always loved that scene, even as a kid. And then he calls out Zod, and we get the fight with the three of them in the city, which is very well done. And the effects for the fight's pretty good. I've always said the flight effects still look pretty good. Granted, I watched it on my computer, but it looked pretty good. Like, you could tell some of the flying scenes, obviously, you can tell some of the background is off, but it's largely decent. It was cool seeing Superman go a bit loose. Obviously, it's not going to be like Man of Steel, because it's not going to have 2013 effects. So, but for 1980, I thought they were still pretty good. I enjoyed the fight, and I thought it was, even the scene when he stops like top of a part of a building, like falling on the ground. And I will say, Christopher Reeve, that smile, man, he really nails it when he does that smile every time. It just works. I'm not one who thinks Superman needs to smile every 2 seconds, because, there are stories where he doesn't smile like that. But, I understand why, though. It's just cool seeing Superman be Superman. And he largely pretty much beats him in the fight, but then he takes him back to, then seemingly they take out Superman, and then Zod and the cohorts kidnap Lois and go to the Fortress of Solitude, but it turns out to be a trap. And basically it deprived them of their powers, and Lois punches Ursula off. And this is where we get the Superman clones, where he kind of clones himself. Not clones himself, but they're holograms essentially, but it's still weird. Ugh. And basically, and this is where we get the scene where he tells Superman to kneel, and Superman grabs his hand and then throws him into a crevice. Which is why I'm weirded out when people complain about him killing Zod and Man of Steel. And I know And I think that there's a TV cut, or I think it's a TV cut or something, or the Donner cut. It's one of those where he's actually alive and they throw him in jail, which I don't like the idea of him just going to jail because they'll just if he just gets some sun, he could easily break out. But whatever. Nod falls into a crevice, so he dies, and then Lois punches Ursa. Because it's a little callback because there was a scene earlier when she initially breaks into the Daily Planet and she tries to purse Ursa and it just, she no-sells it. And they go back to the planet, and this is where Superman gives her the kiss that makes her forget that he is Superman. It's a mind wipe. And I'm okay with it. It's one of those things. Obviously it's not a thing in the comics, but it's fine. That's one of those things that they added compared to like going back to the scene in the fortress really quick. There's a part where he throws his S shield and it wraps around. I think it was at Non, and it's just like, what? I even there's Family Guy even makes a joke about it. It's like even as a kid, I'm like, huh? What the fuck did that come from? But anyway, and he returns to the diner, and this is the part I'm not really a fan of, and I'm still not. Superman wouldn't do that. He wouldn't be that petty, And I guess, he's teaching the guy a lesson, but it just. Like, you got your powers back. I would have rather him, after he did the kiss, he makes a little couple jokes with Lois. Then you have it. Why not just cut to him going and holding the American flag? That would have been a better cut. We didn't really need it. It just felt like a waste of screen time. And I just want to say it. Superman wouldn't do that. I love Superman, and it also just kind of makes people who have a problem with the whole. Because I've seen people complain about the scene in Man of Steel where he throws the guy's truck, but defend this scene. Which, in my opinion, this is worse because he's actually throwing a guy. And this is when he's Superman. At least in Man of Steel, he didn't have a suit yet. He gets his powers back and then does this. It's just, why? Granted, it's kind of funny when he pays off the diner, the employees, but anyway. I do love this sequence, though, when he flies the American flag back to the White House and he tells the president he will not bend his duty again, does the salute. I think then he arrests Lex. Yeah, Lex gets arrested again. And, you get the iconic ending where he flies into space and smiles at the camera. Superman 2 is great. And I even, after the movie ended, I let the score just play out. It's just so good. I think that's the one thing I could say about these movies, even the bad ones, is that John Williams score always carries it. But yeah, the next 3 movies are going to be rough though, guys, especially the last one, Superman Returns. That's going to be very rough. Superman Returns is fucking bad, man. But like I said, if I'm going to be going through the Superman movies, it makes sense to go to watch that one too. So, but Superman 2 is very iconic. It's a very good sequel. Watching Superman 1 and 2 really work, watching them back to back. Even though it's 2-year jump, they don't look that different from each other. That's the one thing I will give Superman 2. It doesn't look that how some movies even compare Halloween 1 to Halloween 2. Halloween 1 and 2, there's a 3-year gap, even though technically it's supposed to be the same night. You could definitely tell the time difference. You could tell. But Superman 1 and 2 is a 2-year jump. And even Return of the Jedi from Empire to Return, you could tell there's a little bit of a time jump in terms of the actual time. In this, they look practically they might as well have been filmed right after each other. I think they really did a good job of keeping the aesthetic of the sequel. The suit still looks really good. Terrence Stamp as General Zod is iconic. I mean, so many iconic lines. You know, I really love the way he played the character. I dug the costumes. You know, it worked for the movie. The final third act's really good. The stuff with Lois and Clark in the middle, you know, their love is done really well. Like you actually want them to be together. You know, it is weird though. Margot Kidder's role does get very reduced though in the next few films. Like in Superman 3, she's like in a couple of scenes, and then it's Lana. They bring in Lana Lang, which is fine because she is Superman's actual first love, was Lana. But for me, it's Superman and Lois. I've always been that. Lana Lang is like, it's kind of like Gwen Stacy to me. Ultimately, for me, it's still Peter and Mary Jane. It's the same thing there, right? He's like one of his other girlfriends, but to me, ultimately, still the ultimate ending is Lois and Clark. So, and then I think she does have a role in the fourth one, but it is more of a romantic role again, like in the second one. Like she doesn't really do reporter stuff. But anyway, but overall, I still love these movies. I think Superman 1 and 2 are perfect back to back. This movie, like I said, I had my problems with it, but I still really love it. And yeah, like I said, we're going to be stuck with a lot of bad ones for the next 3 movies. But I will say this, there are some good stuff in Superman 3. The scene when he does beat his bad version of himself and then he rips open the suit and, you know, saves, because he causes a tanker to, not explode, but to leak oil. He comes back and, like, steals the oil and compilation of saving things and righting the wrongs he did. The only thing is, like, yeah, the villain's really bad. Like, they're just generic, rich, bad guys. You can tell the villain in the end. I wonder if it really was supposed to be Brainiac, because you could clearly tell it was supposed to be Brainiac. But, because there's a way, that machine thing in the end, you could easily repurpose that to, in like a, if you ever did a rewrite or something of that movie, you could easily repurpose that to Brainiac, because I wonder if it really was supposed to be Brainiac. And they just changed their mind and just made it some generic evil machine thing. But yeah, Superman 3, it has some good stuff in it, but yeah, it's pretty bad. I do like the opening scene the opening saving scene, the scene when he saves the oil from the factory. So there is some good stuff in this movie. It's just, yeah, it's pretty bad. And like Richard Pryor's pretty fun. They let him be Richard Pryor in this. So, but anyways, guys. Other than that, tomorrow or Sunday, like I mentioned, I'll be reviewing Batman Under the Red Hood, and I'll try to get a Screen Rant video is gay. Screen Rant is gay video out. Anyways, Pin Down Podcast, subscribe, link will be in the description, and I'm gonna call it here. Alright, y'all. Talk to y'all later. Peace.